Welcome back to the Interrogation Room. I have a special guest, that is radio and television producer, Tommy Sablan. Tommy, thanks for joining us today.
Interrogation Room. This
Yes.
is awesome. No, it's an honor to be here. I'm a big fan of yours, Pete. And you know who told me a lot about you is Jason Ostel. Jason Ostel loves you. So
well, I love him and I love you back. I mean, it's an honor to have you on our show. And I just want to introduce the audience for those of you watching around the country. I want to give you a little bit of idea of who Tommy Sablan is if you haven't met his acquaintance. So real quick, I'd just like to tell you, Tommy Sablan has dedicated his life to giving. As a Chula Vista native, he is not only proud of his San Diego roots, but also heavily involved in communities and organizations across San Diego County. While his philanthropic lifestyle is rooted in his desire to help others, he has had several experiences that have helped shape his path. Mr. Sablan's journey, as many of our own, can be traced back to his childhood. And he's able to look back fondly on the efforts of his single mother, those that she made, into showing her children love and ensuring that they always had what they needed, even with the financial struggles they faced. However, there were other complex relationships throughout his childhood and into adulthood that have inspired him to help others through his work with the San Diego juvenile halls and schools. Both his older brothers became heroin addicts and at a young age combated the issues for the majority of their lives. While much of their relationship was strained due to anger and other issues, he has since been able to forgive them, and that has allowed the experience to teach him valuable lessons that he can share. And so I was browsing YouTube, and I tell you, I came across this amazing TED Talk that Tommy was doing at Donovan State Prison. Yeah. And that just touched me. And I thought, man, I've got to have you as a guest on our show.
Well, yeah, I did that Donovan TED Talk in prison about 2 years ago. And as we prepared for it, I hung out there for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's not the sound I wanted to hear. I can still hear it in my head. It meant my brother Ray was dead. A few minutes later, I walked out of the room, and standing from the door all the way down to the exit was a long line of people. They were all staring at me. I can still see their faces. Wow. And I was able to go into the, cell block, and I forget which one, I think it was A. And I just hung out with about 20 inmates, and we got to know each other. We practiced our scripts. We wrote our scripts together. Wow. And we gave each other, advice. And I was right there with them. I would assume there was a guard, but I didn't see a guard. And they were, I remember someone said, Tommy, whatever you do, don't Google them. Don't try to find out what happened. And and so I did. And so, oh man, they were so nice to me. And then I Googled them and I realized why they were in there. And I kind of felt bad that I liked them. And it was really tough on me because, the way my life is right now is inspired by Chelsea King and Amber Dubois. Yes. And, the monster that hurt them is in prison. And right. I feel like I've never said this out loud, but I feel that I let Brent King down, that I let Carrie McGonigal down by doing that there and becoming, being nice to those guys. But, I see you shaking your head and, everyone needs a second chance. Yes. So I'm kind of confused by it, but when I did it, it was a great experience because it was my life in 15 minutes or 14 minutes, and I just let it go. I was well prepared, and I didn't stumble on anything. And oh man,
you did a great job. I would love for you to share that with our audience. But one thing I wanted to say before you tell us this amazing story is I do believe that God works in mysterious ways, and
Yeah.
you could be a beacon of hope to both families, as you just mentioned, and also an inspiration to those that are find themselves incarcerated for
Yeah.
their own doings. And
Yeah.
so there's nothing wrong with being a servant to all. And I think that's how he would want it. And again, this is not a religious show, but I wanted people to know that your heart, and if you could just take a moment just to share the incredible story of you and your family, your brothers, and there may be some kids out there watching that are maybe into the gang life or into drugs, and they think it's cool, and you know, all the Oxycontin and everything that's going out around right now. Could
Yeah.
you just share that story? Just amazing. And I'll just sit here and listen.
Well, it's August of 2020, and I heard the district attorney, Summer Steffen, just last weekend, a couple of days ago, go on the television and say, you know, we have a problem with fentanyl. We have a problem with prescription drugs. Some of the kids in schools aren't realizing what they're getting into. They may think they're smoking marijuana, but in reality, it's fentanyl. And it goes down as a fentanyl death. But in reality, it was a kid that just went to buy marijuana, which in my opinion still is bad.
Right.
But what she said was exactly what was happening 20 years ago.
Right.
And 20 years ago, people were, you know, into these prescription drugs just like they are today, but it started about 20, 25 years ago.
Yes.
And the corridor is the 56 freeway, Poway, Rancho Penasquitos, that 56 freeway corridor was the capital of prescription drugs. And there were these middle to upper class kids that were getting into Oxycontin by way, you know, the prescription drug thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then realizing that they can spend less money on heroin, which was the same thing, the opioids. And then that's where you got into middle to upper class kids that were becoming heroin addicts. That was 20, 25 years ago.
Yes.
20, 25 years ago before that is when I became involved. As a child, both my brothers, Ray and Frank, were heroin addicts. You know, I'm from Chula Vista. Both my brothers are 9 years older and 13 years older. And they used drugs in the 70s. And they didn't know what they were doing. Back then in the 1970s, people were getting high. People were doing drugs because that was the way of life back then.
Yes.
You know, that was what was going on. And then the people at that time during the late 60s and 70s, all of a sudden, some of them got addicted to heroin. And I grew up thinking, all right, you know, people are getting stoned. People are, you know, snorting cocaine. Just stay away from heroin. Stay away from heroin. That was the devil of them all. And somewhere down the line, my brothers, Ray and Frank, got addicted to heroin. And I was just a little kid, you know. I remember being in a car, going to football practice. I'm like 7, 8 years old. I'm in the passenger seat of my mom's car. My brother Ray was driving. And when we stopped for me to get out to go to practice, I held a spoon in my left hand, and he took out a brown sack. And in that sack was a lighter and a spoon and heroin. He tied up his arm. He lit the spoon that I was holding.
And how old are you at this point?
I'm like 8 years old.
Wow.
And I'm holding the spoon while he's cooking up his heroin. And at the time, honestly, I thought, oh, this is what everyone does. And so he finished. He shot up in front of me, gave him back the spoon, and said thanks for the ride. Picked me up at 7, and I went off to practice. And at the time, I didn't know if at the time if it was hurting me, my head, but it had to have. And as I got older, I didn't even remember it when I was like 15, 18. But as I got older, and doing it more than just that one time and seeing other things, it did affect me. And, but luckily for some reason, I'm okay. And God bless Ray and Frank, because although they were heroin addicts most of my life, and as they were high school football and basketball stars at a Castle Park, and as they got older, they got addicted to drugs and heroin, and into their 20s, into their 30s, into their 40s, they were addicted, and we were a poor family in Chula Vista. And I remember hating them and loving them, hating them, loving them, hating them and loving them as I was growing up.
Yeah.
And as I look back, they were my older brothers. But as I look back today, I'm going to be 56 soon. I'm older than them now. And, Frank died when he was 42, and Ray died when he was 51.
Wow.
And as I look back now and I just think of my life, they were kids. They were kids. But I didn't know that because I was a child. And now what they're going through is what I see now. I grew up in Chula Vista, raised by a single mom. We were poor, but I didn't know we were poor. My mom worked a minimum wage job. We've always had food. I've always had love. And even though my brothers were messing up and hawking stuff and pawning stuff off the stereo and TVs every couple of weeks just to get $20, my mom always loved them. My mom, even through their addiction, my mom, her name was Rosa, and she loved Ray and Frank. And my mom died August 8th, 2011. Frank died December 5th, 1997. Ray died March 18th, 2004. My mom died from that point on. She died of a broken heart. And on August 8th, 2011, my mom went to heaven, and she missed her sons. And, I truly believe that people die from a broken heart. And when I talk to kids at juvenile hall, I start off by saying, hey, I'm not a cop. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a counselor. I haven't even read a book in a long time. I'm just someone that had 2 older brothers. And then I raise my hand and I say, has any of you ever hear of heroin? And they all raise their hand. And at that moment, that's when they accept me, because then I got them, because they believe me, because for some reason, those few sentences that I just said, they understand it. And as you know, at juvenile hall, they can see BS in a second. And if you're standing there saying, hey, be a good guy, they'll next. So for some reason, for about 10 years, juvenile hall, the kids there accept me. And I just tell them, I never tell them not to do drugs, because they already know that.
Right.
What I do tell them is the stories that I have, and hopefully that changes their mind when they do get out, because most of them do get out. And when they get out, they're going to be at a party. And if you have a homie, if you have a friend that says, hey, let's do this, hopefully one of them remembers me, because my brothers did that.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, let's do the heroin.
Yeah.
And I wish I could go into a time machine and go back to when my brothers were, 12, and myself too, because I'm not a saint. I'm,
None of
I
us are,
partied,
Tommy. None of us are.
I partied just as much
Mm.
as them, but I just didn't do heroin.
Yes.
And at the time I was mad at my brothers for doing heroin. I was 16 in the 70s, 80s, and I may have snorted a line or two. And I felt like I was the good son.
Yes.
But as I look back, I was a hypocrite. Um, you know, as I was in the 70s and 80s era where it was almost accepted, just because I may have done cocaine or I did do cocaine, that I was a good guy.
Right. That's, so we justify it in our minds sometimes, right?
Yeah, and that's baloney.
Right.
And I was just like my brothers, but I just didn't do heroin. And opiate, as you know, Pete, is they say that there's a phrase, you got a monkey on your back.
Yes.
With heroin, you got Godzilla on your back.
Well, I've had a drug addiction for 32 years.
So you started at what age?
Well, started 16.
At 16?
Experienced it. And then maybe a year and a half, 17 and a half, 18. The disease of addiction.
Right.
With any opiate. And that's it. But, through the years, I remember one story vividly when I was about 10. My brother Ray was arguing with my mom in the living room. And I remember being in my bedroom hearing it and just starting to get mad, like, hey, why are they arguing? They're arguing a little too long. And I remember I went out in the living room. I'm 10 years old. My brother Ray was probably in the early 20s.
Yes.
And I go there to back up my mom. And I remember Ray said, or they were arguing because Ray sold the flag my mom received from my dad's funeral because he was in the military. He sold the flag, and he probably sold it for $20. And they were arguing. And I remember I kicked my brother Ray out. I said, you need to leave. And he left. And I protected my mom. I put my mom on the living room sofa. I remember it was a Friday night because I remember putting it on like Dynasty, having her watch television, and or Dallas. And then as she was watching it, I'm protecting her. So, back in Chula Vista, the sliding door, we never lock.
Right.
Sometimes you can just open it with a shovel.
Yeah.
So I went in the garage and I got a rope and I tied the sliding door up so he wouldn't open it. And, I'm 10 years old and I remember I got a kitchen chair and I put it right by that sliding door and I protected my mom.
Wow.
But
you were the man of the house, right, at this point.
But I held a knife. I got a freaking knife. And I'm, Ray's not coming back. I got this. And then, an hour later, as I'm probably nodding out, I see my brother Ray at the sliding door. And I remember my heart was pumping. He's not coming in, and he sees me, and he can see me at the chair and with a knife, being a little 10-year-old. And then my mom wakes up, and my mom goes to the door, takes off the rope, opens the sliding door, and they hug each other. And I remember just staring up and seeing this, and I remember my brother Ray looking down and just looking at me like he was proud of me. But also I can see that he was hurting for what he was doing.
Yes.
And I'll just always remember that. It says a lot about my mom. My mom always loved, through the addiction, my mom always loved Ray and Frank.
She's an angel. She was an angel. Amazing. Yeah, our moms are we're so blessed to have good moms like her.
Yeah. And, I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it in the late 60s, early 70s, raising 5 kids alone, because my dad died when I was 5.
Wow.
And they were old school couple where, he worked, he drove, he did everything. So when my dad died, she had to get a job. Yeah. She had to, and learn how to drive and raise 5 kids, 5 kids, and she did it. So when I go through life and I'm struggling or stressed out, or, you know, during this COVID-19 where people are losing jobs and,
Yes.
you know, and getting laid off, when I stress about that possibility, I say to myself, you know, that's nothing compared to what my mom had to go through.
Right.
So if my mom could do that, I could do anything.
Wow.
If my mom could do what she did, I can get through anything.
Wow, that's amazing. I remembered you also shared about the promise that your brothers had. And I know Ray, they played football and they were football stars. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then I think you also told this amazing part about just how much they meant to the community and how many people showed up when they passed.
You know, when Ray passed away, I remember getting the phone call, and this was 7 years after Frank passed away. So when Frank passed away, that woke up Ray. So on December 5th, 1997, when Frank passed away, Ray said, "What am I doing? That's my little brother, Frank, and he just died of long-term heroin use." So as I was growing up, I didn't think it was possible that anyone can get off heroin. But Ray did. Ray got off heroin.
Wow.
But it took
That's
the
a
death
huge monkey off his back. Yeah.
Yeah, but it took the death of Frank. And for 7 years, Ray went to meetings, NA meetings, AA meetings. Those meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, saved Ray's life. And he went through all those steps. He went through, you know, hospitals and institutions, and where he had to go and visit people and talk to people.
Yes.
And for 7 years, Ray inspired people. And so it was cool to have my big brother Ray was back in my life in a positive way. He was always in my life, but in a positive way. Yeah. And it was just a wonderful thing. And when I found out he was in the hospital, you know, the night of March 17th, 2004, I went to the hospital and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I remember my whole family was circled around him, and they were just saying, you know, "Don't go, don't go." And I remember going, "Oh, this is, you know, what's going on?" And I remember I didn't want to hear that sound. I didn't want to look at that monitor in the hospital to see that straight line.
Yes.
And I remember I didn't want to hear it. Mm. And then as I looked up at it, I didn't want to hear that sound. So I just held on to Ray and prayed with my family, saying, "Don't go, don't go, don't go. I love you, Ray. I love you, Ray." And then a couple minutes later, I heard that sound, and I saw that straight line, and my brother Ray was gone. And I remember at the hospital, I walked out of the room, and standing from the room all the way down to the exit was a line of people.
Wow.
There were a line of people that were there for Ray. There were the line of people that never gave up on Ray, and Ray never gave up on them. And they were there to show their respects to Ray. And it was just a beautiful thing to see. And I remember walking from my brother Ray's room to the end of the hospital and seeing all those people and recognizing them. And they were the faces that Ray loved. And they were the faces that loved Ray. And it was just a wonderful thing. And it just gave me inspiration and hope that, you know, if you have someone in your life that is struggling, don't give up on them. Don't give up on them, because for most of my life, I gave up on Ray and Frank, and Ray proved me wrong. Ray proved me wrong. And today, as they're all in heaven now, most of my family, they're up in heaven. I'm proud. yes, I have some messed up stories of holding spoons and seeing my brother shooting up. That's terrible to see, but I don't regret it. And I'm kind of glad it happened, because now I have the wisdom and now I have the words to tell a kid, and that kid can believe me, because, you know, everything that is happening in the world right now, everything that is happening in San Diego, all the drug use, all the drug abuse in schools, and now even more so with everyone locked down at home. I've been there. I've seen it.
Yes.
And so when I hear Summer Steffen, the district attorney, describe what's going on like it's a news bulletin, God bless her, it's not a news bulletin. It's an old news bulletin.
Yeah.
Everything that is happening right now at this moment with drugs, heroin, fentanyl, you know, fentanyl is the new thing, but it's all been happening for decades, as long as I can remember, my entire life. And so, you know,
Tommy, I just want to thank you. I mean, I know it's not difficult. I mean, it is difficult to come on camera and to tell such a personal story. And I'm so glad you came today, because I think there's people that are out there that are watching this right now, and they're struggling with the exact same thing. And I know there's probably a small kid at home who is 10 years old, and he's saying, this man is telling my story. And what would you say to that young boy that's watching right now? What would you say to him?
Honestly, go play. I mean, you know, to a little kid, I wish someone told me to go play. I mean, that's what a 10-year-old needs to hear. I don't need a 10-year-old to say, or sit a 10-year-old down and say, listen, you know, there's a thing called heroin. It's an opiate. You know what? 10-year-old needs to go play.
Right.
But I know what you mean. I would tell them to continue to love the person that's struggling.
Yeah.
And as they get older, as that 10-year-old gets older, you know, just continue to love. You know, I didn't realize my mistakes I was doing when my brothers were struggling until I was older. Like I used to give my brothers $20 so they would be okay. Like when we had a Thanksgiving dinner, I would give them $20 to go get high so they would be okay at the family function.
Right.
So I wish I didn't do that.
Right.
But I did. But I didn't know it was wrong until I was in my 40s.
Right. No, I mean, you were doing the best you could to help them with their addiction, right? And hopefully not be in pain, perhaps just so you could have a normal Thanksgiving, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
But I think something that you touched on is so true, because you mentioned the 56. And for those people that outside of California that may not be real familiar with San Diego County, 56, that whole corridor is predominantly an affluent area. And so that just goes to show you, it doesn't matter if you're in the barrio or if you're in, you know, in a wealthy area. These are struggles that all Americans are having. And there's a lot of emphasis put on, you know, the narcos on Netflix and all the horribleness that's going down south of the border. But we don't concentrate enough on those that are actually consuming and how it's destroying lives. And I wanted you to come on because I thought, what better than to hear from a 10-year-old boy about the effects of what this horrible drug does to you, right?
Yeah. You know, although I'm going to be 56 in a couple of hours, I'm still a 10-year-old. Right. I mean, I'm still that 8-year-old holding that spoon. And I think of my brothers and I think of my mom every day of my life, and I'm proud. I am not mad at them. I'm not mad at Ray and Frank. And I miss them all, but I don't like saying I miss them because I believe in the spirit. I believe they're right here laughing.
Right. And they're going to celebrate your birthday with you, right?
That's something. But I'm proud of you. And I wore this shirt, police department. I know you're sheriff, right?
Yeah, I was a sheriff. That's okay.
Yeah, but you're we got to support our law enforcement.
Thank you.
And that's why I wear this.
Thank you so much. you're representing the blue there, so I appreciate that, brother.
All right. But,
Tommy, you've been so great. Just for those that don't know, Tommy has been gracious enough to invite me on Good Morning San Diego, where I'm able to share what the latest happenings are with Journey to Justice. And I'm just so pleased that you were able to come on. And this has nothing to do with a crime that needs to be solved or a crime that was solved, but the drugs are a scourge in our society. And I think it's important to dedicate a portion of what we do on this channel to fighting drug abuse and drug addiction, and show the truth about what it's doing to families. So I'm just honored to have you as a guest. And I would encourage people to go and search YouTube for your TED Talk too. Just amazing, Tommy. And the fact that you go to juvenile hall and speak to young kids. And I know that our viewership is, people are subscribing as we speak, and there's people that are actually watching us in prison, from what I understand, because apparently they smuggle cell phones. So I know this may have actually reached people that are in prison too. And so I just thank you for coming on and speaking to us today. All right. You're a good man, Pete. And you're an even better man. So thank you so much. Tommy, if people wanted to get a hold of you, just to maybe shoot you a note of thanks or anything, is there an email or something? Well, I'm on, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tommy Sablan, TommySablan. You can find me there, or Little Tommy, LittleTommy at KUSI.com, or Little Tommy at iHeartRadio.com. Very cool. And I didn't even talk about your wealth and experience as far as being a radio DJ, television producer. I mean, all of this stuff is just amazing. And I was going to say that if they reached out to you, can they invite you to be a speaker at their group? Absolutely. Okay, sure. Very cool. Sure. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much, Tommy, again, for coming on. And thank you all for taking the time to watch this episode. If you like what you saw, I just want to ask you to do us a favor. Click down below the subscribe button and share this with your friends and family, and maybe shoot us a comment. If you want to comment to Tommy, I'll share it with him. So, thank you so much, Pete. Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care. All right. Bye. Bye.